We always think we need to be the person that does everything. And with moms, we're always the one that are doing things, and being able to step back and redirecting those resources of how can I best take care of myself and help myself and not be afraid to ask for help when you need it is probably the biggest piece of advice that I can give to somebody going through hormonal transitions, menopause, adrenals, cortisol, any stage of life, really.
Welcome back, my listeners, to the Menopause Disruptor podcast. We're having real conversations about disrupting the narrative around menopause, the way we think about menopause, act upon it, and ultimately treat our menopause symptoms. And we're going to take the lens of naturopathic medicine to address symptom management. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Lyndsey Nabata, a naturopathic physician right here in my community on Vancouver Island in beautiful British Columbia. Dr. Lindsey will discuss the pivotal role naturopathic medicine plays in managing perimenopause and menopause. Growing up in a conventional medicine household, Dr. Nabata discovered naturopathic medicine in college, leading to her career shift into this field of healthcare and wellness. In our discussion, she will emphasize the interconnectedness of various health pillars, which are nutrition, exercise, sleep, and stress reduction, with a particular focus on hormonal health. We also get into other key topics in women's health that, much like menopause, has been lacking in education, knowledge, and research. And that will include the impact of birth control and hormone replacement therapy, HRT, or what we say in Canada, menopause hormone therapy, MHT, on regulating hormones and the roles that both cortisol and progesterone play on female anatomy as we go through hormonal shifts and changes with perimenopause. And we'll also discuss the importance of addressing burnout. If you've ever wondered about other key lifestyle factors such as fueling wisely for the female physiology, protein intake, breakfast, intermittent fasting, well, Dr. Nabata will break down how it has a significant impact on that cortisol and our blood sugar levels and regulating sleep. She also highlights the research of Dr. Stacy Sims, the world's leading exercise physiologist and nutrition scientist. And she also supports my Sermon on the Mount about the benefits of lifting heavy weights and fueling appropriately for the increased load. But just as important it is to positively stress the body with exercise and real food, natural remedies like herbs, as well as mindfulness practice, are so valuable to stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system, where the body truly gets into that rest and repair. But one of the most important facets in women's health is using an integrated approach, tapping into a variety of modalities that bring the female anatomy back into hormone balance as we age. And one such approach that doesn't nearly get enough importance is cultivating a supportive community, seeking help, even if it's just reaching out to the company of friends. But before we hear from our good doctor, here's something you should know about my upcoming guest expert. Dr. Lyndsey Nabata is a naturopathic doctor specializing in holistic evidence-based approach to perimenopause and menopause, with a focus on empowering women through diet, lifestyle, supplements, and bioidentical hormone therapy. She helps patients navigate the transition with confidence and clarity. Dr. Nabata holds many certifications and professional affiliations, including the British Columbia Naturopathic Association, the Canadian Association of Naturopathic Doctors, and the College of Naturopathic Physicians of British Columbia. She is a part of the Canadian Pharmacists Association, certified in immunization, board certified in acupuncture, and a Menopause Society certified practitioner. She graduated with the Academic Excellence Award for being the top of her class. Not only is she one smart cookie, she is one active woman. Loves outdoor community activities, playing soccer, paddleboarding, hiking, snowboarding, which is what drew her to the Comox Valley. We are a very outdoorsy recreational community indeed. And boy, are we lucky to have Dr. Lyndsey Nabata. Welcome, Dr. Lyndsey Nabata, all the way from the Comox Valley. We're probably just a few doors away.
Probably.
But here we are in the virtual Zoom space. And I am very delighted to have you on the show, Lindsey. So welcome and thank you for being a part of the Menopause Disruptor podcast.
Yeah, thank you. I'm really excited to be here. And I've already actually sent a few of my patients to go listen to your podcast to get some more information on menopause too. So it's a real first full circle moment for me to be able to be on it as well.
Wonderful. And for our listeners, Lindsey and I had met at a women's business networking meeting. And when I had learned more about your naturopath medicine, I knew that this was an area that we needed to talk about. Because when we talk about all the pillars of good health from nutrition and exercise, sleep management, and certainly stress reduction, there is such a critical role that naturopath medicine plays in that. You'll dive deep into that with our listeners. But first, I always like to know my guest's backstory. What brought you into this career field?
Yeah, it's actually an interesting story in that I grew up in a very conventional medicine household. My mom was a pharmacist growing up. My dad was a dentist growing up. And even as a kid, anytime I got sick with something, it was always, oh, here's the prescription for it. But I always felt, even from a very young age, I was more drawn to just environmental medicine and our role in nature and how we can best operate as human beings. And it wasn't until I was in my third year of my Bachelor of Science in university. And I remember I came home one day and I was talking to my mom and just feeling really stressed out about what the next steps of my career were going to look like, because I, at that time, did not even know naturopathic medicine was a career option because I grew up in such this little conventional shell.
Right.
And I was telling my mom, I really would like to be in a field where I feel like I could help people healthcare wise. But I always felt like there was a certain aspect that for myself was missing from all the other different healthcare professions out there. And my mom had actually suggested, she's like, we actually get some prescriptions from naturopaths for hormones and things like that. I think that's something that you would really be into. And I remember I went and I Googled, what is naturopathic medicine? Because I had no idea.
Wow.
And I read about the principles of naturopathic medicine, treating the whole person, using the healing power of nature, getting to the root cause of illnesses, really working with the body. And it was this real aha moment for me of, wow, this is exactly what I want to do. I feel like it ties all these different aspects of my love for science, my love for how I'm wanting to know how the human body works, but also that more artistic kind of piece of like, but how can we really unify nature and our own healing to make us feel better and optimize and make us feel our best selves?
Love that.
Yeah, and it was just this real moment of like, this is what I want to do. And to be honest, I didn't think I was going to have that moment. I thought I was going to have to accept that I was going to be in a career that I wasn't completely passionate about and was just doing it to kind of tick the career years by. But I feel very grateful to have landed in a job that I get to go to work and help people every day understand their bodies, understand themselves, and hear their stories, because I think that's a big aspect of naturopathic medicine too.
That is such a beautiful thing to hear their story. And that speaks to the root causes. 'Cause when you start unraveling that backstory, there is something that has probably lent itself to the trauma or the illness or the injury that they store within the body that is causing their
Mm-hmm.
ailments. And when you start to unpack that, but hearing their story and using the wisdom of nature to treat the whole person, I applaud you and those who work in this field of naturopathic medicine for what you do, allowing us to lean into what nature provides.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So, why in particular perimenopause?
Yeah, well, women's health in general has been an area I've always been really passionate about. And I think a big part of that is because from more of the conventional model dealing with women's health, a lot of it
Mm,
is just to be given birth control and have
mm.
these certain symptoms kind of masked down or suppressed. And then you come off birth control when you want to get pregnant or you're going through perimenopause type thing or menopause. And a lot of women's health, I think, over the years has not been an area of medicine that has been researched or has been talked about as much as it should. And I think that's where,
100%.
yeah, and I think that's where naturopathic medicine and women's health really shine together, because a lot of women's health is getting to the root cause of it, right? We're not just trying to make it so that those symptoms go away, but how did those symptoms come about in the first place? So a lot of my early career definitely focused on working more on pre-perimenopause, the 28-day cycle, PMS, all that kind of stuff. So I think I got a really good understanding of hormones and how that works from that. But I found as my practice has evolved, I started getting so many perimenopause and menopause patients. And I think, like we've chatted about before, it's been such an up and coming area. And even my vast understanding of hormones from being a naturopath, I felt like wasn't enough to be able to sufficiently treat women in perimenopause and menopause, because there's so much out there. So that point, that was more just, okay, like how can I broaden how I can help women and how I can treat them? And that's when I started taking all these extra naturopathic courses on hormone replacement therapy, perimenopause, conventional courses on hormone replacement therapy and menopause, and really just trying to get that full picture of how I can help people, because I feel like there's such a deficiency in not just the conventional medical system, but I see even in the naturopathic side of things, honestly, in how to effectively treat women in perimenopause and menopause, unless you yourself are going out there and immersing yourself in the research.
It's so true. And we have seen the statistics are telling us. One reference had quoted that 20% of OBGYNs would confidently say that at some point in their training, let alone their practicum and then working in the field, but some point in their learning journey, did they have an exposure to perhaps a lecture on hormone health and women's health, one lecture. And then 9%, the statistic is probably improving, but we still have so much more to move the yardstick. 9% of medical practitioners, so our doctor, a general practitioner, have confidence in speaking to hormone health, let alone treating it. And yet they still play such a significant role in the decision-making process for a woman when she decides whether to HRT or MHT or not.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so this is what this podcast is all about. We're disrupting that narrative, shifting perspectives, calling it out, and then allowing women to understand all the different modalities for treating symptoms and tackling those hidden ailments that will surface in menopause. But take us on a journey from the premenopausal era of a woman's life when the doctor does put her on birth control for managing her menstrual symptoms and moods. And then take us through that phase where she starts to see the shift and changes in her menstruation leading into perimenopause. And then finally, when she's completely finished her menses, in that journey from a conventional medicine side, what have women been faced with? And then how does naturopathic medicine insert itself in a more positive way using the natural remedies?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think when you can understand the roles that the hormones, primarily progesterone and estrogen, play in the menstrual cycle, and what the symptoms are when they start to go awry, it really helps you gain that understanding of, like, well, where is the root coming from, right? So in the 28-day menstrual cycle, before we've even hit perimenopause, the first half of the cycle is more of our estrogen dominant half of the cycle. And estrogen's role in the menstrual cycle, taken very simply, is essentially to build up the bulk of the uterine lining. So if we have really heavy periods, estrogen is typically a factor in causing that lining to build up really thick. We switch to the second half of the menstrual cycle, and that's more progesterone's dominant half. And
Mhm.
progesterone is what makes us feel nice, calm, relaxed, helps us feel sleepy. And progesterone's role, very simply put, is to keep our uterine lining in place. And then it's the drop in progesterone that starts our period. So I find pre-perimenopause, when we're still having the 28-day cycle, a lot of issues for women really show up in that 1 week before the period or the period itself. So that 1 week before the period, that's when our body is going to be most susceptible to relative differences between estrogen and progesterone. So classic signs of high estrogen would be breast tenderness, heavy periods, feeling more angry, irritable, versus signs of more low progesterone. Because it's what keeps the lining in place, we might see some spotting, maybe some spotting before the period. Might see the cycles start to get a little bit shorter. So if you've always had a 28-day and it's starting to become like a 26-day cycle, that's a sign progesterone is starting to decrease as well. So I find the biggest issues that women will come in with that they put on birth control for are, heavy periods or bad mood changes with the cycle, right?
Mm.
So when we think about the root of that, well, it's likely that there's some kind of imbalance between the estrogen and the progesterone there, right? As a naturopath, there's different questions that we can answer, like clinically, to try and figure out what those differences are. Usually, I can figure out pretty well like what the relative difference is. Sometimes a little bit harder to figure out that like absolute difference, though. And what I mean by that is sometimes like low progesterone and normal estrogen levels can get perceived in the body as high estrogen and normal progesterone too. That's where testing can come in handy. But the conventional approach would be essentially to put somebody on birth control so that we're giving your body a steady level of estrogen and progesterone all month long. So you're not experiencing those big fluctuations in hormones. Rather than what my approach would be to figure out, well, what are those hormone imbalances and what are things we can do to help to either support estrogen elimination in the body or support building up progesterone in the body.
That's fantastic. Simplified way of explaining it. So my choice had always been never to go on birth control. I felt in my young 20s that it was too disruptive. And it was also perceived at the time as that was what girls did, young women did to stay safe from unplanned pregnancy. I always believed that it was just going to mess up the hormones so that by the time that your hormones do shift through the perimenopause and menopause years, you've had this tool in place that was already augmenting your natural rhythm. And I've always felt better self awareness or observation of your body as it naturally cycled. You could start to insert lifestyle choices that might balance the hormones. I really am interested if you could explain to us if one is on birth control, what is a safe way to gradually stop birth control to allow the body to move naturally into a perimenopause and menopause phase. So eventually you're not on birth control, or maybe you still can be in postmenopause years. But what would be a safe way to have that gradual shift away from birth control?
I think you bring up a good point in that like birth control is, I think it started off as a very empowering tool for women. And like we now have control of our fertility. And if we don't want to get pregnant, we have this ability to make it so that we don't get pregnant. But I think you said over the years, it's kind of transformed into now it's a band-aid or a solution for hormonal issues, right? So exactly when women come off birth control, and a common I think misconception that my patients have at least is I'll ask them how their periods are in birth control, and they think that the period that they're getting on birth control is a true period, when actually what's happening, it's just a withdrawal bleed. So a
Mm.
lot of the time it's very confusing for women when they start coming off birth control because they think that their periods were fine on birth control. Everything was all good and now they're bad again. But it's no, they were just kind of masking those underlying hormonal issues that were there and now they're coming to the surface again. So for me, what is probably the most significant thing that I'll notice in birth control and coming off birth control is the hypothalamic pituitary ovarian axis with progesterone. So, progesterone naturally does start going down around when we hit 30. And progesterone is the hormone that is probably the hardest one for us to maintain levels of because stress will decrease progesterone. What can happen to some women that take birth control? Not all women I see this happen to, but because you've been giving your body an external source of hormones for so long,
Mhm.
eventually the brain doesn't have to work as hard to tell the ovaries to make its own estrogen and progesterone. So, what happens is your own systemic levels of estrogen and progesterone are going down because you have this synthetic version of estrogen and progesterone in your body that's acting as this birth control. So that when somebody comes off birth control, now all of a sudden their own estrogen and potentially progesterone levels are too low to actually have that like menstrual cycle to be regular and come back. And I see this more commonly with progesterone than with estrogen in my practice. It can be both. So for myself, when I'm helping a patient come off birth control, what I'll often do for 3 months before they're even off the birth control is doing herbs and nutrients to help support the body to make its own progesterone again, so that you have that foundation to fall back on when you do start coming off of it. And then I find some liver support herbs can be really beneficial too, just to help to flush those synthetic hormones out of your system. That makes a really big difference versus when women come in and they stop birth control, haven't had a period for 3 months, skin is breaking out. It's like, okay, we should have supported the body and built that foundation first before taking that medication away.
Okay. Okay, so just a gradual instead of just a cold turkey stop right now, shift over to the supporting herbs and natural remedies, and then allow the system to go back to its regular functioning without the synthetic. That is
Yeah.
such an amazing explanation about progesterone normally is the one that is the trigger is of absolute concern is the imbalances with progesterone. So would then that make sense why I often hear the fatigue, cognitive function, and the inability to get a decent night's sleep tends to be one of the first things that show up is just that adrenal fatigue, that just exhaustion.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah. Because, yeah, exactly. Like I said, progesterone does slowly start going down once we hit 30. So, as we get closer to perimenopause, we see that deeper drop in progesterone as the ovaries are starting to make less and less. And because we're seeing that difference in estrogen maintaining its levels relatively, but progesterone going down, we're losing those calming benefits of progesterone. We're starting to see more
yeah.
anxiety, more sleep issues, which
Mhm.
is definitely that connection with burnout because you're losing some of those stress coping strategies. The progesterone's coming down. That's why a lot of women that I'll see that I treat for burnout are in their 40s because, sure, they've had stressful lives leading up to that point. They've had careers, they've had kids, but why all of a sudden is it now that their body is shifting into these physiological signs of burnout that are beyond just normal kind of stress symptoms? Because we're seeing all these major shifts and not just the HPA axis, but the HPO, the ovarian axis too.
Burnout is being talked about more recently. There's a book on burnout, and they speak about it from a stress point of view, not from necessarily the perimenopause, the shifting fluctuations in the hormones. So, and you had even said it, we start to experience that more profoundly in our 40s as we move more from just stress triggers and balancing all the challenges in our life to a real physiological issue. But we still have been thinking, and certainly in my case, I'm speaking from experience, we're career women working hard in our 30s. We can because we're young and energetic and go, 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 go attitude. And then a lot are starting their families mid to late 30s, maybe even early 40s, their first child. And suddenly they're experiencing this sensation beyond what they thought they could just push through in their 30s. And we always equated it to it's because I have family obligations now, or I have my career. I'm starting to climb the corporate ladder. I'm starting to get more responsibilities at work, or I'm starting to establish myself in my practice. All that to say is that we've been continuing to believe and mask that burnout in the 40s has everything to do with everything else under the
Mm-hmm.
sun, except our body's hormone shifts. And why do we think that? Because that's how the medical field has always been treating women.
Mm-hmm.
Take some antidepressants, sweetheart. Lose a few pounds. Get a good night's sleep. But the body was naturally doing what it has been programmed to do, and that is to shift and change with the hormones and go out of homeostasis. And this is the role where educated clinicians in naturopathic medicine is stepping in. And I like to take that even further on the topic of burnout and
Mhm.
regulating a woman's balance to get the HPO axis back in regulation for sure. Tell us about the natural remedies and a common program that a woman would go on when she meets with a naturopathic medicine yourself, and you get her started on what nature provides to bring her back into balance somewhat.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think too, and the beauty of naturopathic medicine is because we're seeing the body as a whole. If somebody comes in just strictly for perimenopause or menopause, I am also assessing them for burnout. I'm assessing them for any metabolic changes, looking at their thyroid, looking at all these other things that could be playing a role in the picture. And I would say too, like on the topic of burnout, that is a condition that I do often see hand in hand with my perimenopause patients, and it's something that I do treat both at the same time because they play such a role with each other. I find with even sleep issues, waking up in the night, that could be cortisol spiking in the middle of the night, that could be low progesterone. So if you give somebody progesterone as hormone replacement therapy and they're still waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning, well, clearly you haven't answered everything that's going on there, right? So, as a naturopathic doctor, we're doing the full 1 hour assessment, looking at everything that's going on. With the burnout side of things specifically, usually I am using some lifestyle and diet recommendations to help to regulate somebody's cortisol axis. The main two recommendations that I would say I'd give out to people, and I think understanding how the cortisol axis works like really helps to understand why we do these things. At least that's my how my brain works anyways. I like to understand why something is happening, and I'm likely to do that recommendation more than if I don't understand. So I think like blue screens and light is a big thing that everybody
Yes.
knows. I should be avoiding my cell phone before bed. I shouldn't be
Yeah.
watching TV before bed, but I think when we understand the reason why, and that is because our cortisol axis, so our adrenal axis, is a circadian rhythm hormone, which means it follows a 24-hour pattern throughout the day. So, being a circadian rhythm hormone, it's really synced up to light. So, when our brain sees blue light, typically sunrises are more kind of cool blue light tones. So, when our brain sees blue light, it thinks, oh, it's morning time. Let's be pumping up the cortisol because cortisol rises in the morning and then slowly dips down throughout the day. Versus sunsets are usually kind of more red, like warm hues, right? So when our brain sees red light or warmer hues, that's when it gets the note, okay, it's bedtime. It's time to be lowering our cortisol levels, increasing melatonin,
Nice.
getting ready for bed, right? So really key for that reason that if you're looking at your cell phone before bed, your brain thinks it's morning time. It's pumping up that
Yes.
cortisol. So if you're frequent to getting that like 1 to 3 a.m. wake up time, that jolt time to start the day, which signifies that cortisol surge that's happening, which is a very key note of burnout. Really key to be limiting the screens before bed, and on the contrary too, getting some nice natural light in the morning too. And if the winter time, if it's not natural, just trying to not hit snooze and turning on the bathroom lights too makes a big difference, so that we're working with our natural circadian rhythm and cortisol axis.
That is a really great explanation about the cortisol axis that I had not really come to fully appreciate. I had past guests speak about the blue light and actually the how the blue light exposure at nighttime will disrupt with melatonin, will have a direct impact on our heart health as well,
Mm-hmm.
which I found quite interesting. But to when you explained it in the context, think of the sun and its low level coming up over the horizon. It's that cooling blue. And the sun sets in contrast is that warming reds at night. And that's nature's built-in clock, if you will. Time to rise,
Yeah.
time to go to bed. And yet in our digital era that we live in, we are disrupting it. So no wonder burnout, we're hearing more about it being written in books, more research and talked about because
Mm-hmm.
we're doing it to ourselves. We are throwing our natural circadian rhythm, that 24-hour clock, out of balance just from our lifestyle alone.
Exactly. And the connection and tying that to perimenopause symptoms as well is our adrenal glands. So the ones that do make cortisol and our stress hormones, they also have the ability to make progesterone too. So, as we go through perimenopause and our ovaries are making less progesterone, we start to rely more heavily on the adrenal glands to be making that progesterone. So important that we're making sure that the adrenal axis and the cortisol axis is as balanced as it can be, so that when you do present it this task of this extra load of work to do in terms of making more progesterone because the ovaries are
Mhm.
making less, it has the ability to be able to do that. And also supporting the adrenal too, make sure that the progesterone that you are making from the adrenals is staying as its progesterone precursor and not getting converted into cortisol and kind of stealing from those progesterone stores.
Which is true as well when it comes to when we have spiking cortisol levels. Cortisol likes to feed on muscle tissue as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to the
Yes.
fat stored in the body. We just think, well, if I'm in a high cortisol level, can't we just burn? Can't we just get our glucose from stored fats? And unfortunately, in the woman's body, it steals from muscle. I'd like to go back to what you spoke on, complementing our health care regime with herbs to get hormones back into balance. Diet, our food, our nutrition, and its role
Mm-hmm.
on cortisol. Let's speak about that. Why it's so critical that we really pay attention to what we're feeding our bodies.
Yes. So cortisol has a very close connection with our blood sugar levels, which makes sense. If we were in nature and we saw a bear and our stress levels went up, we would want to be able to mobilize our blood sugar into our bloodstream so that our muscles could use that blood sugar to be able to run away from those threats. If cortisol is not coming in our body because of a bear and it's a chronic just thing that we deal with all day long, that is going to impact our blood sugars and it's going to cause that blood sugar
Mhm.
dysregulation, right?
Yeah.
Vice versa, too, making sure that you have a really solid source of protein with each meal helps to balance the cortisol levels. So, cortisol is not having to act as that savior for the blood sugar and getting it into the cells in that way. So, something that I tell pretty much most of my patients to do is really making sure in terms of breakfast that you are having breakfast at a reasonable hour between with waking up, and that you're having a solid protein source of protein with your breakfast too, because that's really going to set the tone for the day for how your body is going to be metabolizing protein and sugar, and also the energy regulation. And another topic that I would just like to touch on that too would be intermittent fasting, right? So a lot of women will come to my practice and they've been doing intermittent fasting because they read about the benefits of it for weight loss and metabolism and energy. But a lot of the research on the benefits of intermittent fasting have been on men and not on women. So a lot of the female specific like sports medicine doctors, like Dr. Stacy Sims and whatnot, like they're not necessarily opposed to intermittent fasting, but it's making sure that as a female, you are not skipping breakfast, that you are having that solid source of breakfast to regulate your hormones levels and your cortisol levels. So much more important to us than it is to men. And I think it becomes a very natural inclination to, oh, I'm trying to lose weight. If I eat less, then that will help me lose weight, right? Less calories in. Breakfast seems like an easy one for people to skip, just have a coffee and get on with the day. But no, super important that we're having a solid breakfast with a good source of protein.
That is so fantastic. I'm glad that you brought that up. I'm huge on pushing proteins. There are others in this field that will say sometimes we're getting too many amino acids, and that appropriate window of fasting is great for cell rejuvenation. I think that there is science out there, but science can be skewed in a lot of ways. And this is where I'm going to say again to my listeners, and I've said this before, you need to exercise discernment, but get educated. So when you take the advice from Dr. Lindsey, when you take the advice from Dr. Stacy Sims, you have to measure it against what is your lifestyle, of course. And I will speak from personal experience now because I also really push, lift heavy, build muscle. The moderate or medium level intensity workouts is all about sculpting, which is when you're young, it's great. It builds muscle endurance. But as we get older, muscle mass has such a critical role in so many aspects of our lives. And I can get into that at great detail. But For this conversation, I will say that I have taken this advice that I learned from Dr. Stacy Sims, the Menopause 2.0 course, being one of them. And I'm taking the advice of even the other leading experts in this field, including Dr. Sarah Saul, formerly Dr. Sarah Gottfried. Lift heavy and don't be afraid to get heavier pound dumbbells, but fuel your body appropriately to meet the demands because protein fuels muscle and muscle is more metabolically active. From my experience now that I have been lifting heavy and coaching women to lift heavy, I would do the time restricted eating TRE and my window, and it's still pretty much the same thing. I try to finish around 7 at night and I close that window. And then I don't open that eating window back up until about 9. So there is my 14 hours. 14 and 10, 15, 9 work ideal for me, but I've been monitoring it safely. I
Mm-hmm.
will say though that with the heavier working out, and because I'm getting up earlier to work out with clients, I'm ravenous by 8 o'clock in the morning. And I'm saying to myself, but it hasn't been my 14 hours yet. Here's the fallout to that mentality. Cortisol levels are staying high at night. Interesting. I'm back to a pattern of crappy sleeps again. So now I've actually have upped my protein first thing when I get up. So I have, say, like a hard-boiled egg and maybe a half a banana or something, just to get something in my belly so that I am fueled properly. And the results translate at the end of the day. I can get back to sleep. I'm not as hungry as at dinner, so I can close my window, say maybe 6 o'clock, and still reap the benefits. So, the moral of the story from all of that is this, and you'll probably say the same thing. When incorporating lifestyle changes and dietary changes, do yourself a service and monitor progress. I think it's really important to journal, but more so, work with the team, the professionals in clinics, work with the doctors, the naturopaths, such as yourself, so that they can monitor your progress as well. Because we tend to still go through life with old limiting beliefs and our blinders on.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the next thing I wanted to speak to. What are these roadblocks that your clients come up against that are deeply rooted in a mindset that may have come from the way that we were told women should look, act, feel, lift, eat, to what truth is in our science today about the woman's health and hormonal health?
Yeah, I think a lot of women that I see have this mentality of I have to be everything for everybody. I have to be the mom. I have to be the best at work. I have to do all these things. Rest is considered for a lot of people a waste of time in their day. So when I chat with women, like, what are your coping strategies for stress? What do you do that makes you feel relaxed, gets you into that parasympathetic state? A lot of people are kind of dumbfounded by the question and think, I don't know. I watch some TV at night, maybe. I don't really have any means that get me into that nice, relaxed type state. And as a practitioner, I can give some helpful tips for how we can activate the vagus nerve, some different teas and herbs like that to help get somebody into that more relaxed type state. Lavender, holy basil, really good ones for that. Deep breathing, gargling, even humming will help activate the vagus nerve. But I find a lot of that comes to like this very root core issue of rest and relaxation makes me worthless in that sense. And I think that's such a key thing that like so many women need to dive into more with themselves, whether it's through some own journaling or working with a counselor, because as long as that mindset there of I can't rest because I'm wasting my time, it'll make it so that if you do set time aside to do something relaxing, in your mind the whole time you're going to be thinking about what else you could be doing in that moment. So it
Mm-hmm.
really makes it so that even if women set aside time to go rest, they're not really getting that true, deep, restorative relaxation that the body needs to heal, right? The body only heals when it's in a parasympathetic type state. It doesn't heal when it's in that sympathetic fight or flight. That's not where the resources are being diverted to. So, yeah, it's such a key thing. And I think naturopathic medicine can really help with that. But that's also where like the integrated approach of, okay, do you have a counselor? Do you have somebody that we can work through these core beliefs with? Maybe if you don't know how to relax, maybe let's get you some craniosacral or some acupuncture. Get your parasympathetic and your vagus nervous system like online so that you know what it's like to feel relaxed, right?
Oh, good.
Yeah.
So good. The integrative approach for that deep restorative healing, for that body to have that rest, repair. It's as you were speaking, I had an epiphany and I visualized this box where all through our teens and 20s, we played in the sandbox with the boys because, of course, we were always told, well, women are just small men, right? So if they can do it, you can do it. Yeah, maybe not as many push-ups, but it's as though we played in the sandbox, we played in the middle. The middle ground is the moderate work, where we can go for a really, really long time. But over time, playing in the middle doesn't make sense. We almost need to be on the extreme edges now of that box, where on the one side, it's that high intensity work, like I was saying, increased loads, shorter duration, shorter reps to really challenge and tax the muscles from an external force point of view. And then on the other extreme, we cannot disregard it. If we're going to play the extremes, we have to play on all the extremes, is stimulate the vagus nerve and downregulate that sympathetic nervous drive. So going right into the opposite side of I've worked really hard, I've got to rest really hard, really well.
Mm-hmm.
And those modalities that you'd said, which are now science is telling us, we can still do more research, but what we're seeing now, we're getting results. Acupuncture, even the breath work, like you were saying, restorative
Mm-hmm.
yoga, the just allowing the body to restore, but in such a way that we're allowing it and making peace with it. Because there was
Mm-hmm.
a time, let's face it, a lot of us ladies, cardio queens, 80s, 90s, get on the treadmill, then the Stairmaster. We were hardwired to believe that this was the way to work. Now we're seeing as we enter into the perimenopause, menopause age, we have to shift that way of thinking. And I really appreciate that you said the best way, it's the integrative approach. Who's on my team? Who are the players on my healthcare team that are going to guide me through this, stepping into this age of wisdom where we now actually, for the first time, for many of us, are really understanding the wisdom of the body.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's something that we see in a lot of cultures other than our own, is that the perimenopause, menopause transition is seen in a lot of cultures as this really beautiful opportunity to go more inward and like really focus on more of those yin kind of restorative type activities. And yet in North America, we're seeing it, even the name menopause, meno stop, end of the menstrual cycles, is seen as very much an end. And I think there's a lot of resistance from women that don't want this to be the end. They see it as the end of their careers, the end of this, but it's no, it's just a shift. It's a transformation in that energy, right? We don't see these other major hormonal transitions the same way as we treat menopause, right? Like puberty, even though it has some negatives to it, it's seen as this really beautiful process of a girl becoming a woman. And pregnancy sure has its concerns as well, but it's also seen as this really beautiful hormonal transition too. And I think perimenopause can be seen as the same too. We just need to change our cultural mindset around it.
So beautiful. It is so true. The Western culture has shifted the mindset on menopause, but we're bringing it back. We're
Mm-hmm.
pulling it back. Let's leave our listeners with one piece of really great advice. Depending on where she might be, entering into the perimenopause phase, end of the menopause, 12 months, no menses, and is stepping into this new beautiful phase of her life. But we're all still feeling the stress, and we need to close that stress cycle. What is a really great piece of advice from naturopathic medicine?
I think really finding that community of practitioners and friends as well to be able to support yourself too. Stress and rest, if there was just one answer or one solution that would fix it all, we would all be taking that thing or we'd all be doing that, right? But it's so multifactorial. So I think finding somebody that you really connect with that can help guide you in those directions of different practitioners that can be helpful, or different classes to look at can be really helpful too. And I think also taking the time to journal and become aware of those symptoms too, so that when you do go to those certain practitioners, you have that information to be able to give to them, which you might think is insignificant, but that's very valuable information to somebody else. And also to track your progress too, right? But I think not being shy and not being afraid to be able to seek help. I think when it really boils down to that would be the advice. I think we always think we need to be the person that does everything. And with moms, we're always the one that are doing things. And I think being able to step back and redirecting those resources of how can I best take care of myself and help myself and not be afraid to ask for help when you need it is probably the biggest piece of advice that I can give to somebody going through hormonal transitions, menopause, adrenals, cortisol, any stage of life, really.
Oh, true. Dr. Lindsey, that's such a beautiful way to bring it all together, using the tools in the toolbox to cultivate community and awareness. And that always begins with being bold to say, I need somebody on my team. I need my community, my healthcare team, or friends. Tell our listeners where they can find you.
I'm a practicing naturopathic doctor at Origin Integrated Health in Comox, where I do provide virtual visits for anybody that lives in BC as well. You can also find me on Instagram at Dr. Lyndsey Nabata, and my website is www.drlyndsey.nabata.com.
We will get all those important links in the show notes. Dr. Lindsey, I can see an opportunity for further discussion. There's so much more to talk about when it comes to women's health. We are complex, beautiful beings, and there's so much more to unpack. I hope you listeners took away some important tips and tricks and advice from this discussion. Dr. Lindsey, thank you for sharing your time, your space, your beautiful energy here on the podcast.
Thank you for having me on the podcast. It's been a beautiful experience.
Beautiful indeed. I love how Dr. Nabata was able to simplify an understanding of our body and our response to hormone changes and stress, and how important the role of naturopathic medicine plays in hormone health, hormone balance. And we didn't even get into bioidenticals. But here are my key takeaways from today's episode. The often overlooked aspect of transitioning off birth control and how to support the body effectively during that transition to reduce symptoms or even evade drastic new symptoms from coming up, such as skin issues, the relationship between cortisol and blood sugar levels, and why fueling in the morning with a protein is such a wiser way to set yourself up for facing the demands of life. And then the relationship between cortisol and progesterone. Progesterone plays a vital role in overall health, and we often think it's declining estrogen that's to blame, myself included. But as we approach menopause, the levels of progesterone and other hormones do fluctuate significantly that lead to that variety of symptoms, namely fatigue and the mood swings, and that overall feeling of burnout. And that's where the hypothalamic pituitary ovarian axis is so crucial in regulating our hormones. So as progesterone decreases, it can affect this HPO axis, leading to further hormonal imbalances and fatigue. It's really important to understand this connection and seek the help to better manage with a doctor, a clinician who does truly understand this relationship. The use of herbal remedies to stimulate the relaxed parasympathetic nervous system, that rest, digest, restore state. I personally am a fan of ashwagandha, but again, in this episode, we barely scrape the surface on the topic of herbs, which is why I have to bring Dr. Nabata back. But coupled with effective stress management strategies such as meditation, mindfulness work, yoga, you can significantly improve your quality of life during this transition time. And finally, seeking the holistic healing wisdom that has sustained humans for generations and embracing a deeper understanding of our body's natural processes so that we can reclaim our health. And taking an integrated approach, which combines naturopathic medicine with other holistic modalities, is truly an ideal way because it treats the whole person, mental, physical, emotional, and yes, spiritual person. Through approaches like naturopathy, women are well educated, well supported to navigate menopause using all of those tools that include natural remedies, lifestyle adjustments, and incorporating effective exercise to balance hormones. So by integrating ancient wisdom of these practices, we can move beyond symptom management and cultivate long-term well-being in harmony with our body's innate intelligence. If today's insights resonated with you, I'd love for you to be part of our growing community of menopause disruptors. Hit that subscribe button wherever you're listening right now. And if you know someone who can benefit from these conversations, please share this episode. Sometimes a simple act of sharing can be the first step in someone's healing journey. And hey, if you're ready to take the next step in your menopause journey, I'm here to support you. You can find all my services, including my comprehensive Menopause Intelligence digital course, one-on-one coaching programs, and workplace education services at mlcoaching.com. It's in the show notes. Want to stay connected and get regular doses of menopause wisdom? Follow me on Instagram at Menopause Disruptor Podcast, where I share tips, insights, and real conversations about navigating this transformative phase of life. Let's continue to disrupt this menopause conversation together. Remember, midlife should be the best life, and it will be. Namaste.